Number, please.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to probably what would be the final edition of the Film Geeks Podcast for this year. And yes, we started this podcast, in fact, restarted this podcast when the pandemic, the worldwide lockdown started way back in the summer. But yeah, right now, it's at the end of the year, and hopefully we can wish this incredibly difficult year goodbye with some talk about films and TV shows, in fact, at least one TV show which has got us through this incredibly difficult year, which has been for everyone involved. And of course, joining me as always are my comrades and cohorts, Arindam and Anirban. How are you guys doing?
It's finally good to be back and talking movies with you guys again. Like, of course, we talk on a daily basis, but not like this on a podcast. So I'm glad that we are recording again.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I've missed this a lot. I think as people can figure out, we have tried to up our game a little bit so that it's visually also appealing a little bit. I think we'll keep on doing that production wise and see how we can improve it.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get more views now. Even someone like me is looking directly into the camera. Otherwise, most of the time I was just looking towards my left. And yeah, so that brings us to the best of show, the best of movies, the best films that we watched. Basically, how it's going to go. It's not going to be a traditional list per se. What we are planning to do is we have a list of 10 films, but since it's the three of us, we're going to pick three films. That makes us 9. And the final film is a film which we all agree was, in fact, the best according to us. It might not be the same according to you, and what you guys feel is the best. You guys can please let us know either on the group or probably on the comment section here. But yeah, so kickstarting this edition, the final edition of the Film Geeks podcast for the year 2020, let's go to Arindam. Arindam, what is the first film that you want to talk about?
The first film on my list is starring one of what I consider is one of the greatest actors of our generation right now, Riz Ahmed. It's Sound of Metal, directed by Darius Marder, and it was released on Amazon Prime just maybe a week or two ago. It's basically about a drummer who goes deaf, and he has to totally, rewire himself to learn to live with this, not a disease, not a handicap, but learn to live with that entire experience of being someone who is so attuned to the world, being a musician, being tuned to the fact that something that is so essential to what he does as his daily, that's his profession, that's his livelihood, and he has to change his world around that. So I felt the closest movie that I can think of that I can compare this to is not Soundtrack, which is also dealing with a similar subject that starred Rajiv Khandelwal, which was also a remake of Scottish movie called It's All Gone Pete Tong. It was about a musician who goes deaf. It dealt with, the premise was similar, but they had totally different approach to what happens. In this movie, what I can compare this to as close as possible is Roman Holiday. I don't think there has been a better, a depiction of a real life romance, which that the fates, they can't just end up together. They are running on parallel lines which will never meet, and the way that they depict that is just beautiful. And that is why I had to include Sound of Metal in my list of my favorite romantic movies. That's almost anti-romantic in a way for this year.
In a year that has been very difficult, I think this one was something that was very uplifting. And I do agree with you completely when you say that this guy is one of the most talented actors out there. He has done so much. He has been in one of the best comedies that I've ever seen, which was Four Lions. And he's absolutely phenomenal as an actor, as a musician too, but which is on full view in this movie. I think this one, absolutely a brilliant choice. So my first choice for one of the best movies of the year, according to me, is The Assistant, which stars Julia Garner and was directed by Kitty Green. Now, this is a movie, if you have heard anything about it, is a movie that Bombshell should have been. It is a Harvey Weinstein movie, but never once in the movie is Harvey Weinstein ever named specifically. But it is heavily sort of implied that it is him who is behind all the things. Now, this is a very, very well crafted movie in the sense that this only shows one day in the life of a junior assistant, which is played beautifully by Julia Garner. It shows all of her struggles, moral struggles, where she has to stay in the industry also, and she knows that being an assistant is the best way forward. But she also struggles with the ethical side of it, where she has to go and sort of report on the executive, which means that she might be blacklisted in the future. And the struggle is something that comes to the forefront of this. Now, like I said, Harvey Weinstein is not named in this, but you can feel his presence without ever seeing him. You can see when Julia Garner is going to his room and cleaning up the couch. She puts on gloves, she cleans the couch. Even she's not aware about why she's doing it, but that moment itself is so powerful. When she finds an earring that belongs to an actress or a starlet who wants to make it big, all of this have compulsions, and it's not so much about Harvey Weinstein, but the people who enable that behavior. In that sense, it is absolutely pitch on perfectly shot, because you can see the congestion on the screen by how tightly compact the camera never moves from the subject, and if it does, it's very slow and purposeful. So it's cut in a way where you also feel like you're trapped in a moral quandary at all times, which is why this movie is very important and should have been the movie that Bombshell should have been aspiring to become. So this is my first movie that I picked to be one of the best for the year.
I would disagree with one fact that with the bombshell analogy, and the primary reason for that is true, they have the same, a similar subject matter, but Bombshell doesn't need to be a Harvey Weinstein movie because Bombshell is a Roger Ailes movie. And so I get where you're coming from, but yes, it doesn't really need to be the same film or aspire to be the same story, which the assistant was saying. The movie which reminded me the most of Assistant was one of my favorite movies from last year. And it's not the same subject matter, it's not the same way of editing, but the amount of tension and the amount of weight of what you see on screen can only be equated to something like an Uncut Gems, mixed with, say, A Personal Shopper starring Kirsten Stewart from a couple of years ago. If you guys have watched it, if you've not, please go ahead and watch that as well. It's an amazing, effective performance by the actress, and I think this should be her breakout role. But let's see where things go for her, because 2021, I'm not really sure what she's doing next, but I can only imagine that with Ozark closing up soon, she will definitely have a lot of things where we can see her. And let's just hope that this is just the first film to what can be an amazing career. And speaking of, let's speak about my first movie, this movie, in fact, just took me by surprise. And this movie was The Outpost, directed by Rod Lurie. And it's based on a book by The Outpost, An Untold Story of American Valor by Jake Tapper, the CNN reporter. And it's about the Battle of Kamdesh in the War of Afghanistan. It stars Scott Eastwood, Caleb Landry Jones, Orlando Bloom, Jack Kesey, Corey Hardrick, Milo Gibson, Jacob Scipio, and Taylor John Swift. It's based out of CPO Keating, which was in fact a tiny fort that the army built in the base of 3 mountains in hopes of winning over the Afghans in the nearby villages. And you don't really need to be an army expert to know that it's stupid to put a base where your enemy can literally fire down on you, right? And then you have 53 Americans and their Afghan allies, neither of whom make any progress in winning the local tribesmen to the cause of progress and freedom. The soldiers are usually from the cross-section of America. You have your very Christian boys, you have your atheists, you have those who are caught in between, you have people from all walks of life, from the rural Americana to even city slickers. And then comes the attack by the 300 heavily armed Taliban intent on wiping out COP Keating. And the action takes over, given and it's so impactful when the first shot just fired. And these men who are caught in between in the situation which none of them had, everyone was thinking that this day is going to come. And even as an audience, the tension just keeps building. And when it releases, it's not cathartic. It's one of the most powerful long drawn action sequences that I've seen in a very, very, very long time. In fact, I was telling this to you, and every time this movie comes up, I'm going to make this comparison. This is what 1917 should have been. 1917 to me, again, this movie as a plot, it's not as it's more or less the same, but the execution of how we get to where we do, that is fantastic. 1917 is one great trick, and that is one constant shot, and it is done masterfully by someone like Sam Mendes. He is pedigree all over. But this guy Rod Lurie came out of nowhere, and he just, the last 45 minutes is some of the greatest action scenes, some of the greatest action cinema that I've seen in a very, very, very long time. It is shot masterfully. It has wonderful performances, especially by Caleb. It is just insane, and it is very highly underrated and highly underwatched. I would it comes with my highest possible recommendation. You guys go ahead and check this film out. Has any one of you watched it?
Yeah, I just watched it maybe last week. I really liked it. It reminded me, like in a very morbid way, of Spinal Tap, all movies. Spinal Tap, because you know how they have the rotating cast of drummers going on, right? So they had that rotating commander who someone kept dying, someone kept just shifting. And there is one shot in the movie that just blew my mind. I don't know, I still can't figure out how they shot it. It's basically, they're in a bridge. It's a single take. It's the bridge is like without any suspension. So, only one person can pass through it. The camera goes from that person behind to one in front, and then suddenly they shift it, and there's a drone that shoots the entire bridge. Basically, it's one continuous shot, and then there's an explosion, and then they show the aftermath of that explosion. I still have no idea how they've shot it. It doesn't look very expensive. It's just filmmaking at its best, at its core. It's something like in Jaws, like it's one of the longest take, but you don't realize it's a long take because the background is changing when they step from the one barge and they go into the island. It's like filmmaking on that level. So this gives me very high hopes on what the director does next, because there were some clever tricks that were employed. You can see that it is made for a measly couple of dollars. The big names that they have do not last that very long in this movie. So definitely check this out. This has my highest recommendation too.
So my second choice for this evening, for this show, is going to be an Indian movie for a change. It is Anubhav Sinha's Thappad. It is a movie that centers around very hard topics that you have to get used to, and is very much part of Indian society, but talks about it in a very relevant way. I'm talking about patriarchy. So if you look at how the characters are built, Taapsee Pannu's character is there, and her whole life revolves around her husband, who is a working executive from the moment she wakes up early in the morning to taking care of the kids, preparing food, and everything. And if you look at it from the other point of view, which is the husband's point of view, he is providing for the family and he's taking care of the house. So other people don't have as much say. Even his wife doesn't have as much say in what happens in their day-to-day life. And it's shown very subtly in very different ways. So most of it, you can see that Taapsee Pannu is happy in that whole thing till the time that the husband, played by Parvez Gulati, he slaps her for under stress, duress. Now, at no point does it feel like Anubhav Sinha is trying to demonize his character by showing him in a negative light. They show what the whole process of why it has happened, but they also attach it in a way that they show Taapsee Pannu character waking up from say a slumber to understanding why she is being relegated to playing second fiddle in her own life, which is where the whole story can be surmised in a way that once she realizes she has this awakening and she decides to break that mold and come out of that whole thing. The thing that will sort of be relevant in this case is you will see even characters who can be referred to as woke, like for example the father or the brother. You know, even they are not really supportive of the way that Tapsi Pannu character is trying to act in her own interests, and even somebody who's as feminist as the lawyer also goes against that grain and says, "Okay, maybe you shouldn't be doing this." And all of that is very brilliantly captured in this movie, and I think it's something that is very socially relevant. And no matter how woke you think you are, there's a very subtle message where it talks about everybody being complicit in the whole patriarchy theme that people actually talk about without us actually knowing it, which is why I think that this movie should be definitely there on our list of top 10 movies of the year.
Thappad for me always hits it. It hits you like a ton of bricks when you see these microaggressions, which I think all of us have given out knowingly, obviously, and unknowingly. And these, and when you realize that, and then it hits you like a ton of bricks, like you are complicit in the same behavior to the women in your life, and again, knowingly or unknowingly, and there's no good or bad about it. It's just the product. It's We are all products of the society that we are from, and I think without preaching or without going to throughout all of these lessons which people like Raju Hirani and all do, I think Anubhav Sinha has hit with Pink also, his previous film. I think has hit a sweet spot which talks about socially relevant themes without it coming across as very preachy. And he gets fantastic performances, with the exception of the lawyer, of course, who just can't act to save her life. But that's neither here nor there. I think Tapsi Pannu in Pink and especially in Thappad gives her career best performance. And I'm really excited to see what Anubhav Sinha does going forward. Arindam, what is next up in your list?
The next movie on my list is The Hater. It's directed by Jan Komaso. It's a Polish movie that Netflix distributed, and it has to be on my list because politically it's the most relevant movie that has been made this year. It tells us how social media basically influences elections, it influences mindsets all over the world. This is focused in Poland, but we can see the same things happening in India, in Americas, and everywhere in Asia, basically. Over here, there was a very worm of a guy. From the first scene itself, he set up this creep. He's like this online troll who appears friendly as hell, but then he infiltrates every strata of the public, like people that he goes to. He showed one of the creepiest methods that I've seen, that you can record people at home. So what this dude does is he leaves his phone at some person's place, like some person he's visiting, and he leaves the recorder on. So, and he turns on his speakers, he goes outside, he takes a walk, and he listens to what they have to say about him. This is such a brilliant way to show what a creep this person is. He comes back to collect his phone, and then they show him listening to basically what they said. And those people that he's recording are his benefactors. They helped him come out from the village. They sponsored him, and using their social, standings, he just worms into their lives, into their professions. The people that he's involved with are also involved with the mayor, and then he basically joins the political party as someone who is inclined as a social media marketer, and then he does some of the most heinous stuff and actually gets the job done. And one of the strangest things about this movie is that in 2018, whatever they shot was the principal photography was over in 2018, and in 2019, whatever happens in the climax of the movie happens in real life in 2019 in Poland. So this movie just came out of nowhere, and everyone was blown away by this. I think this and Social Dilemma hit at basically the same point, and it just blew, I think, all of us away who were discussing whatever was going on in India. This this movie is something that you should definitely check out. Hater, it's out on Netflix.
Right, and next up, of course, is a movie which I love, and as people who know me and who have heard this podcast before know, I'm a huge fan of horror films. Uh, this horror film is again a movie which is criminally underwatched. I don't understand why no one really talks about this film. And this movie is His House, which is written and directed by Remy Weeks in his feature film debut, from a story by Felicity Evans and Toby Venables. It stars Wunmi Mosaku, Sope Derusu, and Matt Smith from Doctor Who. I was absolutely blown away by this film because I was expecting just another cheap thrills horror film, but instead got one of the most amazing movies that I've seen all year. Just the brilliance of the two lead actors, Wumi Mosako and Sope Dirusu, is enough, but it also has an amazingly crafted plot that actually feels completely different and unlike 99% of the horror films, which have stupid cliffhangers and ambiguous endings added. The feeling of isolation within the community and being refugees in the modern day United Kingdom was also very well done and very true to real life, both good and bad. Scenes like people being xenophobic, social workers being somewhat cold and disdainful, but ultimately coming through and helping the couple, and the local pub and the depiction of the social status and the social strata within which His House is filmed is completely authentic. The design of the creatures or the ghosts are extremely unsettling. I've been watching horror films my whole life, and I got chills down my spine every time the creature called the Nyaga showed up. The Apeth, of course, reminded me of the Moonlight Man from Gerald's Game, and for comic book fans, this is something which Mike Mignola will revel in. The design again was very good, and I felt somewhat tense to watch him rise from the ground, and all the faces in the walls made me very, very, very uncomfortable. In summary, I think this is a movie which is absolutely amazing in the way it handled the story, the themes of loss, guilt, new beginnings, and finally forgiving oneself. The scares are meaningful and not just cheap jump scares. The actors did an amazing job, which was completely emotionally invested in their story. And this movie is heart-wrenching, it's brilliant, and it's a fucking amazing debut from Remy Weeks. And I look forward to seeing more of his voice in future movies, because it seems like he has a lot to say and the know-how to make some of the great films. Hopefully, I hope it doesn't he becomes again a similar voice to someone like, say, a Jordan Peele. A fantastic film. If you haven't watched it, it's streaming on Netflix. It's called His House.
There's some moments in there that capture that whole thing perfectly. I mean, the whole you feeling out of place thing that you're talking about. Like, one of the scenes really struck me as really, really powerful was when she sees this group of boys where she's lost. She has to go uh, to the church. I think she's trying to find the church, and she sees this couple of boys who are of African descent, and they're playing out there. And she goes to them to ask for direction. I think it was also from a point of view where she was trying to feel comfortable because she saw somebody who she might find some sort of help from, because
They look like her.
yeah, because of the color of their skin. I mean, you do, even that happens even here in India, right? We tend to find people from our own state. So when she does that, and she is treated not just with disdain but with a lot of racial intensity, which is something that even I was not prepared for, because that's something that is not that you expect. And that itself drives from the point of isolation that you're talking about. I think it's a brilliant movie. It also sent chills down my spine, and it's, I know those, a lot of those things are just metaphors for a lot of the socially relevant problems that are affecting not just the UK, for example. It's just affecting the rest of the world, even here in India. So I think this is another brilliant film to add to this list. The next movie that I'm going to talk about is something that was not there on my list when I originally thought about my list of movies, which is a brilliant animated movie, which is made by Irish production house called Cartoons Salon, and it has the movie I'm talking about is Wolf Walkers. The studio has produced brilliant works such as The Secret of Kells and The Songs of the Sea, which both of which were nominated for the Oscars, the animated Oscars, and are brilliant in their own right. So one thing is that this is not just one of the most beautiful animated movies of the year. It is one of the most beautiful animated movie. It's one of the most beautiful movies of the year, and that's not just because of the fact that it is hand-drawn animation, but it's also how much painstaking care they have taken to frame each of the scenes that are there in the movie. Like they have done a lot within the 2D format itself, which will stand out to you. There are split screens, there are different mediums that are explored. The whole thing looks like a very beautiful watercolor painting in movement, which in fact is something that I think even in 2D cinema is 2D hand-drawn animated cinema is something that is not easy to achieve. Cartoon very rooted in two things. One is their whole focus towards Irish lore, and the second thing that they are really focused towards is them looking at the key theme is always uh, trying to stay grounded and in your roots while also making space for change or progress, if you might. So you have brilliant voice characters, voice acting, and you have brilliant 2D animation, which both of which come together to make this a very beautiful story woven together to talk about Irish folklore. I love old Disney movies, so this for me was a perfect blend of all the right elements: the animation, the voice acting, and most of all the storyline, which for me, again, all three combined makes it one of the best movies of the year for me.
So next movie on my list is something that the trailers really intrigued me, and I did not think that this would live up to the hype as much as it did. It's directed by Anvita Dutt, who was a lyricist basically, and she made something that can be described as poetry in motion. It's called Bulbul. It came out on Netflix, and it was produced by Anushka Sharma's company, Clean Slate Films, which has been giving us some of the best TV shows and best movies out of India. And they have produced two of the finest horror movies, and this ranks among them. After Tumbar, this is probably the best horror movie that has come. It's basically a folklore that is brought to life, but from the lens of what Francis Ford Coppola did in 1992 with Dracula. This is cinematically, it's that good. The performances are top notch. Triti Dimri, she's a newcomer, but it didn't feel like she was a newcomer when she was acting against the likes of Rahul Bose and Pauli Dam. It's masterfully made. The story, I think we spoke at length about Bulbul. It's almost an hour-long review that we did, and you can definitely check out our full thoughts on it. It will be linked below, so definitely check that out.
Right, I think the analogy, the Dracula analogy, is definitely correct. Not just because of the way the film is shot, also because of the narrative, because it speaks from the eyes of the so-called monster. It's a very 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 strong feminist film, which doesn't really hit you over the head with its messaging, and it's definitely a movie which you should check out, especially if you love horror films. Next up for me is a movie which is very close to my heart, uh, especially because of the politics which I believe in, and that is The Trial of Chicago 7, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin, which is the story of 8 people, technically 7, who are on trial stemming from various charges surrounding the uprising of the 1968 DNC in Chicago. It stars Eddie Redmayne, Alex Sharp, Sacha Baron Cohen, Jeremy Strong, John Carroll Lynch, Yahya Abdul Mateen II, Mark Rylance, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I feel like this movie is perfect in its timing. The widespread protests, police violence, judicial appointments, political trials, the chaos behind the concept of law and order, and being someone who actually agrees with most of the political views of the protagonists in this film, and who has attended protests, and only to have the narrative to be reconstructed in a misleading way 99% of the time, it felt like somewhat justified to have this similar story told on screen. It hits very close to home, especially if you're following the Indian politics scenario. And I love the way they portray the differences between Bobby Seale and the rest of the group. Bobby Seale, of course, who's a part of Black Panther, was not treated like a human being with equal protections under the law during this trial. The scene where they physically gag him and make him feel, actually made me feel ill. And after it was done, I was filled with this really, really deep anger. Obviously, he's not a huge part of the conclusion of the story, but I am very happy that they gave it plenty of time to absorb what he went through and how he was treated in the initial phases, rather than have them treat him like some sort of a tangent. Then the differences between Redmayne's Hayden and Sacha Baron Cohen's Abby Hoffman was great. I love the dialogue, and I feel it tells an entire story within itself about what's currently happening in the left side of the politics, not just in the US political spectrum, but in the liberal politics as a whole. I'm someone who relates to someone like Sacha Baron Cohen's Abby Hoffman a little bit more, but when Hayden stands up to the judge, I actually wanted to scream at him, because the ending is a little bit fanciful. It's a little filmy, so as to say, but it just does right by what the movie stands out to achieve. And fucking Frank Langella, man. I mean, I think the last character who I hated so much was Joffrey Baratheon, and that guy was a fictional character. And Frank Langella's character is a real life douchebag who was in the highest positions of power, one of the highest positions of power, the Supreme Court judge in the United States. Overall, I can see why this movie might not be super satisfying for a lot of people. And I completely understand that, especially those who don't share the same political views as myself and those of Mr. Aaron Sorkin. But for myself, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a very, very, very topical film. It's a film which everyone, especially if you are concerned about where the law and order is going, where the political spectrum, the conversations around that are going, if you want to see what is actually plaguing and how the history completely repeats itself over and over again. This is a movie which you definitely check out. It's, again, streaming on Netflix. And after shitting on Netflix, the better part of 3 years, most of our favorite films are streaming on Netflix or are Netflix films. Please go and check this out. It's an amazing watch.
I think it was an easy casting choice to have the man who played Skeletor to be a Supreme Court judge. I think that was a stroke of genius. Also, one of the best performances in that movie was Sacha Baron Cohen, who also made a movie that nearly made my list, but I had to leave it off because I felt there were better movies that were made this year. Borat was just amazing, and this came out in the same week, so he had a great week. That span of week was just amazing. What I did not like about this movie is the way they ended. It was self-congratulatory, and it also another problem that they had is that it focused on a story that had the spin-off of that story was way more interesting than whatever was happening in court. That was the story of the Black Panthers that was going on, and I really hope that they decide to release that movie soon, which we will see Daniel Kaluuya play the role of the person who I don't think he plays Bobby Seale, right? Or whom does he play?
No. He doesn't.
The
play
person
Bobby.
who dies.
Yeah, he plays.
It's called
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, Judas and the Black Messiah. That is one movie that I'm hyped for, and I think that was a cardinal sin in which you need. I know the story was about the Chicago 7, but the way they just decide to end that story it was like the ending of Life of Pi. It just comes out of nowhere. So it felt abrupt. I did not like the flow, and also how they ended it. I think someone like Fincher would have done a much better job with this one.
Right, and that brings us to the movie which all of us thought was the best. At least we came to a common consensus there. And compared to 2019, which in my opinion was one of the best movie years ever, 2019 has been a little bit of a hit and miss. And this movie is this movie which we're going to talk about now is a movie which has received like middling reviews, but we thought it had some of the best career performances by two of the biggest mainstream actors who are working currently, and they are Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson. And the movie which we are talking about right now, our number one pick of the year, is The Devil All the Time, written by Paulo Campos and Tony Campos and directed by Tony Campos, based on a book by Donald Pollock. And it stars Robert Pattinson, Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Haley Bennett, Riley Keough, Harry Melling, Sebastian Stan, Mia Wasikowska, Eliza Scanlon, and Jason Clarke. You guys can make a film just on all of these guys can headline a film, and this was such a star-studded cast. And the way I see it is this is a movie about God and the creation of his angel of death. And one thing about this God, he doesn't protect, but he definitely avenges. Doesn't protect, but he definitely avenges. And that is why you had the one of the latest Avengers, Tom Holland, playing a starring role in this film. The most important part of Arvin, played by Tom Holland's life, is when his father teaches him that in order to take revenge, film die on a string, because that would be the perfect time to manage to kill him. And if any of them died in a different location, all the others would be alive. And this is something like kind of a butterfly effect, which plays throughout the entire way of this film. The way the movie is paced, I personally thought that it would be great to see a prestige miniseries. But I was really happy with the performances, especially that of Robert Pattinson. I think uh, he's going to kill it as Batman, and he was fantastic in Tenet. And anything that I've seen him in, Robert Pattinson has just gone from strength to strength. But Tom Holland, man, that guy, he came onto his own in this film. His accent was on point. The way he carried himself was on point. And Tony Campos is the first film which I've watched of his, and I think that it definitely can come across as a little slow, but the way and for the way and where the film is shot, the surroundings of the film, and the time period in which the film is shot, the very rural, very poor America set in the Appalachian Mountains at at the fag end of the 50s and the starting of the 60s. I thought it was a fantastic film. Let's go to Arindam. What did you think of The Devil All the Time?
This movie just shouldn't have worked. Like looking at the star cast, no way would I believe that this would be this good. Uh, I saw the poster, and I think that was reason enough for me to say I won't watch the trailer for this movie. I just wanted to go in blank. I did not know that it was a period piece. I did not know all the actors who were involved. I just saw that poster. There were few. I said, okay, it stars basically half the MCU, so I'll be fine just knowing that. And what surprised me the most, even more than Tom Holland or Robert Pattinson, the performances by Jason Clarke. The second was by Sebastian Stan, and mostly by Bill Skarsgård as that haunted soldier. Man, the way they set up his character as being such a fine all-American guy, and now he devolves into this religious fanatic who just tortures his son and his family. I think that was masterful. I just did not expect this movie to hit home closely as it did, but it absolutely is one of my favorite noirs that I've seen in a very long time. And yeah, I have no problems giving it, calling it the best movie that I've seen.
I think it's very important to look at why this movie is our collective best movie of the year. Not only is it because it has got some brilliant performances, but it also has a story where we're looking at how violence not just affects one generation but moves across generation. I think that's something that's talked about quite a lot, but you see that in this movie in action. And it's not just that, it's about how faith plays such an important part in people's life and how destructive it can be because it is being run as a business, as a business by people who have no right to run it because they only see it as a business and a way to exploit people. And that is on the forefront. I mean, how good are the actors in this movie? I mean, how good is Sebastian Stan? How good is Robert Pattinson? And how good is Tom Holland in all of their roles? I mean, they play all of their roles so brilliantly. You can see how the motivations are being affected by the decisions of their forefathers. Tom Holland, definitely. Bill Skarsgård, he's absolutely one of the best character actors out there. He plays some of the best, really best characters. I mean, the whole Skarsgård family is amazing, but Bill Skarsgård, I think he's one of the better Skarsgårds acting wise, and he definitely shows it in this movie. I mean, how real is PTSD and how real is the fact that it makes him into who he is, and how real is the fact that it affects all of the decision that he makes, and consequently that decision creates a ripple that moves across generation and makes Tom Holland do what he does. And I think in that way, this is something I would agree does deserve to be the top movie of the year for the Film Geeks.
Right, so Devil All the Time. And I guess we all agree upon that we agree that Devil All the Time is the best film of the year. Of course, your mileage may vary. You may have a completely separate list. You may uh, violently disagree with our list, and that is fine. That's absolutely okay. But if you do, please let us know what are your top 10 films of the year, either on the group or in the comment section of this video that you're watching. But that does it for this edition of the podcast. Thank you very much for sticking to this podcast. Whoever 50 people who have watched our videos throughout the year, thank you very much for your support. And please like, share, and subscribe this video. And have a wonderful year. And we will try to see you more often in 2021. Not promising, but we will definitely try. Thank you very much, and have a great year. Merry Christmas, and see you again next year. Bye-bye.